Welcome to the Imperfect Dads Podcast. This is your host, Devin. We believe dads care deeply about their family and kids, but they don't always have a space to discuss what their life looks like. Our podcast is a space for dads to discuss the ups and downs of fatherhood and how they feel like they're holding it together or how they're not. Thank you for joining us for this episode. This podcast is part of the Never a Face Network. Make sure to follow them on Instagram or go to the website neverafacenetwork.com. On this episode, we have an Allan Shedlin from Daddying Film Festival. How I found Allan was kind of cool. An account called Daddying Film Festival started following us on Instagram, and I noticed it was a film festival about fatherhood and encouraging people to make videos about fatherhood. So I thought I'd reach out to them, see if they wanted to do anything on the podcast. That's whenever I was introduced to Allan and found out he's been an advocate for film and fatherhood his entire career. His articles have been featured in the New York Times, he sat on presidential forums to talk about fatherhood, and he coined the term dadding to make being a dad a verb. For this conversation, we talked about his journey with fatherhood, from being a teacher to leading schools, conducting interviews with dads to learn about their lives, writing a book, being a dad, being a grandpa, and a lot of the life lessons he's learned about fatherhood along the way. Make sure to go to daddyingfilmfestival.com to learn about the rules for submission for films and all that the organization does. And also just like one more thing.
Dad, just start the episode.
Oh, my bad. So tell me a little bit about you. You said you have 5 grandkids. How many kids do you have besides the 5 grandkids?
I have 3 daughters, and 2 of them have children, equaling now 5 grandkids. And what can I tell you? 4 of my grandkids already graduated from college.
Okay.
Right. So if I look old, it's because I am. Right. And some of my grandkids are old. So one is a sophomore, as I mentioned, at University of Colorado in Boulder. Let's see, I'll go up the line. So she's 19. And then there is a 23-year-old grandson who is working in a veterinary hospital right now and is waiting to hear about getting into veterinary school. Mm-hmm. The next one in line is 25. And she is a special ed teacher in New York City. The one waiting to hear and working in a veterinary hospital is in Virginia. Then the next one up the line is a 26-year-old grandson who is currently coding for the next moon landing for NASA. And He lives in Houston. And then the oldest one just turned 28. And she is a clinical social worker in Nashville.
Really? I lived in Nashville for 18 years. So
really?
Before I went to Belmont University, which is a college there.
Yeah.
And then we stayed there. And actually last year we made the move out to Denver. So very well associated with Nashville. Still love it. But yeah, no, Nashville's a great town. I hope she likes it out there.
Yeah, she does. Like, this is year 3.
Yeah.
I did visit her in year 1 and I really liked it as well. I just didn't get enough music, but otherwise I liked it a lot. No, I'm kidding. I got plenty of music.
I was going to say, did you just not go out? So you just stayed in your hotel room. That's how you avoided all the music.
No, I did have a particularly interesting experience there, which or germane to or focus. So that granddaughter's name is Casey, and Casey and I refer to each other as heartmates.
Okay.
Because we are very, very similar in lots of different ways. And I was telling her, I was there for a very long weekend, probably 4 days, actually. And I said to her on the way out, Casey, during my entire life, I have been told that I shouldn't wear my heart on my sleeve. Men are not supposed to wear their hearts on their sleeve. And I said, I'm finally agreeing. They're right. I shouldn't wear my heart on my sleeve. I should tattoo a heart right on my arm. And this would be the place to do it. So how about if, and she said, well, what about if we get matching tattoos? And I said, great, let's do it. And I'm sure we can find a tattoo parlor open on Sunday in the Nashville area. So we went to East Nashville. We walked in and the tattoo artist looked at me and he said, how nice of you to accompany your granddaughter for her tattoo. And we both laughed, and he eventually laughed as well. And we got matching tattoos. So I'm proud to say I have a tattoo here on my arm of a heart. And then I got home and I realized, oh, you got 4 other grandkids. You can't play paper, but you ain't about to get 4 other tattoos around your body.
Probably not.
No, but we had left the heart open, which is,
Okay.
I'm sure, symbolic. And I told each of the other grandkids that they could choose one word or one symbol to put inside the heart. And so the heart is now full in
That's
more
cool.
ways than one.
Yeah.
And it was just fascinating to me what they chose. They all wanted the same word, which is the word I always use when people ask me how I'm doing, and I say I'm flourishing.
Yeah.
And so they like that. And so that word actually appears alongside the heart. And the 2 granddaughters chose, I call one Toots and the other Tootsie. So that also appears, that's a little
cute.
above the heart. And inside the heart, really quite fascinatingly, so the grandson who's working in a veterinary hospital said he wanted to put a clock to symbolize how much time we spend together. And that on the clock, he wanted it to say the time he was born. So
Cool.
that's inside. And then the oldest grandson, the one who's going for the moon landing, says, I want to put the equation for the first law of thermodynamics.
Okay.
And I said, Ben, I don't think I mentioned to you that I have veto power. That is not appearing on my arm. And the reason it's not appearing is because I would have to explain it to people, and I
Every
would have
day.
no clue
Every day.
to that. So why don't you explain it to me, and then we could figure out a different symbol. So it basically represents, that it's equal what you put into what you get out.
Okay.
So what that heart has now inside is 2 arrows going in opposite directions, equal arrows. And so that's what the symbolism.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's much easier being a grandfather than a father, or as I prefer to say, granddaddy than
Yes.
a daddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, much easier. Believe me,
Yeah.
you'll get there and you'll say, yeah, he was right, and he's not the first one who said it. Right.
No, I understand that because, I don't know, the personal stress that's on you is so drastically different. I would assume whenever you're a grandparent versus hey, these are my own kids. I imagine it's just a very different role of leadership and how you can show up in that world. It seems very different than as a parent. So tell me about the word flourishing. Why do you choose the word flourishing? What does that word mean to you?
So I choose that word, first of all, when you ask somebody how they're doing, you usually get okay or pretty good, or I'm on the right side of the grass, or, that kind of stuff. So I worked for a while, which is a lot of fun, and most people are shocked when they hear this, given everything else I've done in my life. But I worked for a while at Trader Joe's.
Okay.
Couple of days a week, so that I could get my health care covered, because you only need to work there half time to get full health coverage. And there was one walking distance from where I live, and I loved shopping there. I liked the attitude of the people and the fun and the product. And so I worked there. And one day, there was a really old man, even older than me, who looked like he was probably 150. And I wasn't sure he was going to make it through the store. And the store that I was in was the second smallest of all 500 plus Trader Joe's stores around the country. And he was leaning on his shopping cart. And even though it was a tiny store, it took him about 2 hours to get whatever small amount of grocery needs. And he got up to my register, and I was really happy to see it survive the experience. And I said to him, how you doing? And he said, I'm flourishing.
That's cool.
And I thought, if you're flourishing, there's no excuse for the rest of us ever. And so I started using that term. And when people would ask me how I was doing, I would say I'm flourishing. And the response it gets from people is quite extraordinary. And often they say, I'm stealing that. And I say, you don't need to steal it. I'm happy to give it to you, but there is a condition. You can only say it if you mean it.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where it comes from. Some of the customers started calling me Dr. Flourish, Mr. Flourish.
To flourish.
It was really cool. And I use it all the time.
Yeah.
Because I follow that you can only use it if you mean it. And happily, I'm lucky enough to mean it.
That's awesome. I really believe in the power of words and choosing words specifically. I know you're currently wearing a hat that says daddying. Can you explain to me what the word daddying means to you?
I can explain it, and I'm happy to explain it.
Please.
I don't know if I sent you, Devin, this or not.
You did not. Do not disturb, daddying in process. That's awesome.
Daddy in progress. And on the back is the definition of both daddying and advocacy.
Okay.
So I'll tell you about the derivation and what it means to me. So I'm an educator by background. So I began my career as a teacher of severely emotionally disturbed and autistic children in the New York City public schools. And a long, long, long time ago. And I realized that the term special in our culture generally has a positive association until you put the word education after it. And special education, more often than not, unfortunately, doesn't have a positive association for many people. But I realized that, I always thought it was positive. And if you work with kids who are severely autistic, and by the way, it was so long ago that there was no such terminology as being on the spectrum. It was you were autistic, period. And if you were autistic now, if we think about the spectrum, you would be severely autistic and or severely emotionally disturbed and or both. And I realized that to be successful as a teacher with those kids, you really had to figure out and identify what their strengths and assets were and be able to build on them. And I wondered after about 10 years of doing that, what would happen if I used the same sort of mindset and philosophy working with gifted kids? So I end up at a school as principal of a school for gifted kids also in New York City. It was an independent school. And I used the same philosophy, looking at their strengths and their assets and building on them. And my hypothesis was confirmed about how the kids just flew in a good kind of way. The autistic kids were flying in other kinds of way, but
yeah.
In any case, and I did that for 10 years, for 8 years, and I got I had a rule as a school principal that at our weekly faculty meetings, you weren't allowed to complain unless you offered a suggestion on how to fix what you were complaining about. And I held myself to the same. And I realized there were three things that I wanted to complain about. The first was the lack of recognition of the importance of the earliest school years. So, as your all 3 year kids were in elementary school.
Yes.
That, in my mind, is the most important level of schooling. It's where the foundations are laid, where the habits are set, where the kids' minds are, sort of growing at the fastest rate. And, you ask people, where do you go to school? Where did you go to school? Everybody tells where they went to college, if they went to college. And I thought, no, there's something backwards about that. And I felt it quite intensely, Devin, especially as a man, because as you know, and I'm betting, I don't know where you went to elementary school, but I'm betting you probably had a male phys ed teacher. And maybe in 5th grade, you had your first male teacher.
Yeah, maybe 6th grade. Yeah, no, you're pretty close. Yeah.
So, and it's not a wild guess. It's just sort of the way it is. And So, here I was working at the elementary level, and people are saying to me things like, Alan, you're not serious. I mean, you're not serious about saying at the elementary level. You really see this as a stepping stone, right? To be a high school principal or a superintendent or a college president. I, I'm very serious. This is where I want to be. Now, the fact of the matter is, I have taught all the way from graduate school up to nursery school, is the way I like to say it.
Cool. Yeah.
So I taught at all the levels. So that was the first thing I wanted to complain about, was the lack of recognition of the importance of the elementary school years. The second thing I wanted to complain about is, as a special ed teacher, you're used to having rich dialogue with other professionals who care about kids. So you might be talking to psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, neurologists, and pediatricians. If you're working in special ed, it's kind of routine that you do that.
Mm-hmm.
You're in, quote, regular education. That doesn't happen unless there's a problem. And I miss that cross-fertilization. And the third thing I wanted to complain about is, having begun in the New York City public schools and then end up as a principal of an independent school. When you're in one or the other, you kind of look at the other as the other,
Mm-hmm.
if not the enemy camp.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was pretty absurd. And so those are the three things that bothered me. And so I left my principal's job and I created something which a year later became the National Elementary School Center. And that was located in East Harlem and in New York City. And we addressed those three issues.
Mm-hmm.
And, one sort of example of what we did is that we did 2 annual conferences, one in New York and one for me in Hawaii. Yeah, it was real
That's
hard.
awful.
Yeah,
Who chose that location?
Yeah.
What a monster.
It's just terrible. And when we would introduce our keynote speakers at the conference by where they graduated from elementary school.
Okay, yeah.
And people would say, what? Where did they go? Yeah, well, guess what, folks? That's why we do what we do. That's what we think is important. And so we made our point in that kind of way. Anyway, after 10 years of doing that, I got burned out trying to raise enough money to keep the place open. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. We're getting to the daddying question.
You're good. I love the story. Thank you.
I haven't forgotten. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And a family friend found herself in conversation with my 3 daughters, who at that point were in their early 20s. And she came to me and she said, I don't know what you're doing next, Alan, but the way your daughters speak about you have to write a book on fathering.
Okay.
What could be more flattering? I'm sure you get that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now I'd be like, oh, me? Oh.
Right. And because I'm a smartass, my response was, it's lucky you didn't talk to them when they were teenagers. He might have gotten a little bit different take.
Yeah.
A little. It wouldn't have been very dramatically different, but somewhat dramatically different. But I said, fathering isn't a book. And she said to me, what are you talking about? And I said, fathering is a one-time biological act requiring zero commitment whatsoever, just a shot of DNA. And if you want, I'll describe that for you in a paragraph, but you probably took biology earlier.
Yeah.
And you get it. But again, not criticizing something without offering an alternative, I came up with the word daddying. And daddying is what happens when fatherhood and nurturing intersect. And it is a lifelong process. As you've probably already figured out if I'm telling you about my grandkids. And, so it's lifelong. And I would say, thank goodness it's lifelong.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the term daddying comes from. And interestingly, so being asked to write or being suggested that I write a book about it, I'd written a lot in education, but I had never written anything about being a dad.
Yeah.
I thought, where the hell would I begin? I guess I should reference myself as a dad. and then also reference myself as a son and as a grandson. So I spent some time doing that, and then I had this other kind of unusual idea. So if you want to improve, you're wearing earphones. If you want to improve your earphones, or you want to improve a toaster, or you want to improve a car, the best way to do that is to interview the consumers and ask them, what do you suggest? These are really pretty uncomfortable. What could I suggest you put some foam or whatever it is you're doing? And I realized that the consumers of daddying are children. And so I should start interviewing children.
Yeah.
And I also remembered that when I was a principal, our curriculum in the pre-kindergarten, and this is true probably all over the country, that in kindergarten, your quote social studies curriculum is community helpers.
Yeah.
So you look at the policemen, the firemen, and postal workers and so forth. So our 4-year-olds began with the community helpers within the school building. So that was the custodian, that was the secretary, that was the people who worked in the kitchen, that was also the principal.
Yeah.
And so the 4-year-olds would sit on the floor in my office in a circle and interview me.
That's awesome.
Right. And they said, "What do you do?" And I'm figuring they have no friggin' clue, as 4-year-old, what a principal does.
Yeah.
And I'm still figuring it out myself. And I said, "I'm happy to tell you, but I wonder what you think I do."
Yeah.
And this 4-year-old boy was stroking his chin like he was a wizened old man. And he said, "I think the principal is like the daddy of the school."
That's sweet.
And I said to him, "You know what, Billy? That's the best definition of my job I ever had."
Yeah.
I know why I'm exhausted every day, because there are 515 of you, but it stuck in my mind, and it was a great description of my job, because that's really kind of how I saw it.
Yeah.
I think he meant the daddy of all the children in the school. He was even more accurate saying the daddy of the school, because whether you're a male or a female principal or something in between, you also are the parent of the teachers, the parents, the board, everybody else. But I know you would have had no concept about that. Lucky him.
Mm-hmm.
So I set out to interview kids, and I did 28 focus groups in 3 countries. Kids who are as young as 5 and as old as 21. Each focus group was alike age, so there wasn't a mix of 5 and 21-year-olds. Then I thought my book outline proposal was pretty decent. I moved from the New York, Connecticut area to the greater DC area. I know nothing about book publishing, so I got an agent, which I felt fortunate to be able to land an agent. And she said, "Have you interviewed dads?" And I said, "Nope." And she said, "Why not?" I said, "Too obvious." And she said, "Yeah, that's cute. Go do it." So I set out to interview dads. And I sort of finished the book proposal after about 50 interviews with dads. I've now done 205 interviews with dads ranging in age from 16 to 104,
Gosh, yeah.
from 20 different countries, not in 20 different, but from 20 different countries,
Mm-hmm.
every socioeconomic, ethnic, religious group
Everything.
imaginable. The first 50, which really helped with the book proposal, I did for me, to help with the proposal.
Yeah.
But since then, the last 155 been done for the dads, because what I find in these one-on-one dadding interviews, which last an average of an hour and a half, that at the end of the interview, when I say thank you so much for your time, every single dad says, "No, thank you so much,"
Mm-hmm.
asking those questions and for listening.
Yeah.
And so my experience with those 205 interviews, it's as if I gave dads permission to take their fingers out of the emotional dike, and everything just flowed. And
Yeah.
once it started flowing, like the story of the kid taking his finger out of the
Mm-hmm.
dike, There was no stopping it. And there are some interviews that lasted 4 or 5 hours. So it
Yep.
was really pretty amazing. So the first 50 were for me. The last 155 are for the
Yes.
dads, to give them an opportunity to think and talk about being a dad and to display their vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And more than 90% of the dads either outwardly cried during that hour and a half or fought back their tears because, boys are not supposed to cry. And
Mm-hmm.
men, man up and don't cry.
Yeah.
So my belief is that crying is a strength and vulnerability is a power. And so those two things, which are kind of were socialized as no-nos, no, that's wrong. So anyway, that's where daddying comes from. That's now what ended up happening is that this is now in 2003. The book gets turned down through the agent by all 8 publishing houses she goes to. And according to her, she tells me they all say exactly the same thing. And that is, best proposal we've ever seen, perfect guy to write the book, but men don't read, men don't buy books, no book on fatherhood is ever sold well, and no one ever heard of it.
Dang.
So this is again 2003. There's a giant irony, which is that there was a bestseller around that time, and it was written by Bill Cosby.
Oh, is it Kids Say the Darndest Things?
Yeah, it was at the moment of his, height of his fame with his television program before the height of his infamy. So it's kind of ironic. And his picture was on the cover. I was determined to get myself into a publisher. I got rid of my agent. I felt she wasn't enthusiastic enough about the book. I got myself into Simon & Schuster. And, of course, now if I was doing it, I would self-publish it. I wouldn't go that route, but that wasn't something that most people did in 2003. And when I went in, I said, I know nothing about publishing, which was true. And I said, what happens next? And I handed her the proposal. She said, I read your proposal. She was an editor. If I like it, I send it up the line. And I said, what does that mean? And she said, the editor-in-chief, and she'll read it. And so the editor actually very quickly, she called me back the next day. She said, I love it. I'm sending it up the line. And 2 days later, she called me back. She says, the editor loves it. She's sending it up the line. And I said, but wait a minute. I told you I know nothing about publishing, but wouldn't the editor-in-chief be the end of the line?
Yeah, they're the chief.
Yeah. And she said, no, marketing.
Okay.
And I heard with my own ears what she had heard from the 8 prior publishers.
Yeah.
So, I had put 2 to 3 years of work into it, with all the interviewing and the writing and so forth. And I was more than a little disappointed. And I thought, I've listened to all these guys and kids, and there is so much soulful sadness that comes out of their responses to questions I asked about daddying and so forth, that I can't ignore that. And if it's be a book, I got to think of something else to do. And I went to see a movie in 2003, a wonderful documentary called My Architect, a Son's Journey. It was one of the 3 Academy Award nominees as Best Documentary in 2003 by a guy named Nathaniel Kahn. His father had passed away 25 years earlier and was a very, very, what I like to say is the most famous architect I never heard of. And his name is Louis Kahn. And he decided he wanted to find out about his dad. He knew very little about him by studying his buildings and interviewing the people who commissioned the buildings.
Yeah.
And it is an extraordinary documentary, I guess, hence the nomination.
Yes.
I cried to about half the movie. And I wondered why it nailed me quite as much as it did. I figured that out pretty quickly. But then I had the thought I wish my father was sitting next to me, watching this movie with me, because we could have talked about the issues that came up in the movie that might have been very difficult for me to bring up spontaneously.
Yes.
If we were talking about what we had just seen together, we could do that. That's where the idea for a dating film festival came from, back in 2003. I have ADD, and I got distracted for 17 years. And during those 17 years, I did use film to do programs for fathers. I did workshops, and the main heading of the workshops was helping fathers become the dad they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I did those workshops on Native American pueblos and the penitentiary with veterans groups and Head Start centers at the World Bank, in lots of different places. And a lot of them, by the way, were in New Mexico. So I created an entity called Real Fathers, spelled REEL, as in a real movie reel.
Yes.
And about 5 years ago, on the last day I was shaving before I allowed my beard to grow, there was this really old man looking back at me from the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Hey, Allan, whatever happened to the idea for the film festival? Buddy, you're not getting any younger."
Yeah.
And so one of my mantras is leap and a net shall appear, which is pretty scary for anybody who's entertaining the possibility of working with me in any way.
Noted. Good to know.
Right. So I knew nothing about film festivals. I had volunteered for one in DC 1 year, so that was all I knew. And yes, I know the names, the big ones, whether it's, as we said earlier, Sundance or
Yep.
Cannes or Berlin or Toronto. So there are, 5 or 6 really big ones that everybody knows about. There are actually 12,000 film festivals a year.
Oof. Did not know
12,000.
that.
Right. Yeah. But I'm a little foolhardy, so that didn't faze me. And I knew somebody who knew something about film festivals. It's a really terrific program, international program, but based in Santa Fe, and it's called Kids First. Its fancy name is the Coalition for Quality Children's Media. And I knew Rani Levy, who started it 32 years ago now. And I called her up and I said, "Rani, I know nothing about film festivals. You do. Would you work with me in creating a film festivals?" The first year, which was 4 years ago, shouldn't it be 5? 2026 will be 5 years. We did an all virtual Kids First Dating Film Festival, and we accepted only films done by students, elementary school through undergraduate college. And I was blown away in that very first year, we received films from 17 different countries. And it
That's cool.
blew my mind.
Yeah.
So I learned a whole bunch of things, including that it was easier to work on my own than in partnership with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Rani and I are still friends, and she's an advisor, but we decided to go it alone.
Yep.
And so year 2, it became the Dating Film Festival and Forum. So we decided that it wasn't enough just to have the films available virtually, that we wanted to create a forum. So it's the Dating Film Festival and Forum. And the forum is bringing people together to see the winning films and to discuss the issues that came up in the film. So it's
That's
a
awesome.
very different kind of film festival.
Yeah.
We're not interested in questions about how long did it take to make the film, what was your budget, what kind of camera
Yeah.
did you use, and that kind of stuff. No, the focus is on the issues, very much like in 2003 when I saw My Architect, A Son Journey, and I wanted to talk about the issues. In year 2, we did a live version, day-long version in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, because as I mentioned, I've done a lot of work there. And by the way, my oldest daughter was a bilingual teacher in Albuquerque at that point, so it gave me an excuse to visit her as well. And then we got invited in year 3 and 4 to bring it to Philadelphia, which, given where I live, that was a heck of a lot more convenient. Also, it's known as the city of brotherly love. And the day that we did the festival, we begged them to change it to the city of fatherly love. So it was never legally changed, but we referred to it that way.
That's fine.
And then this year we decided it's time to bring it closer to home. And so this year it will be in DC. And as of 2 days ago, we received a film from Senegal, which was the 50th country that has now submitted films. And we are completely blown away that it has created that kind of interest.
Yeah.
Which really just tells us that it's of universal interest.
Yeah.
Daddying. And so we're really excited to do it in DC at the end of January. And we're doing it in partnership or in collaboration in some ways. I haven't figured out the right word for it, but it's being done it will take place at American University.
Cool.
Which is in the DC area. And we have some interns now from American University, and they have a very big and good film program there. And we're also going to be doing, I only found out 2 days ago, but we're doing they're doing a workshop. Film students are doing a workshop to teach kids how to make videos using the production studio that they all have, which looks just like this.
Yeah, it's about this big. It's in your pocket every day.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to do a 4-hour workshop, 2 hours on making a video and 2 hours on how to use social media in a responsible way. So that's going to take place November 15th. And the other way it's evolved, which is very exciting, is that large conferences are now inviting us to curate a couple of films and bring them to the conferences.
That's
so
awesome.
we did that in LA in April. We did it in Chicago about a month ago, and we did it in New Orleans about 2 weeks ago. And so now that has begun to get known. And so now we've been contacted by 2 or 3 others. So
that's awesome.
Trying to figure out, leap in a net shall appear.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, we don't really have a staff.
Yeah.
So we have somebody who is in charge of communications.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually the only paid staff member. And then we have Godsend to us, which is, we're calling her the assistant producer. And she was the student who 2 years ago won as the best collegiate filmmaker submitted a film. So she won in the collegiate category.
Yeah.
She's just turned 25, and her name is Julieta Butalam, and she graduated from San Jose State University in their animation program, and she's terrific. It's really a godsend, and she created the most amazingly wonderful 5-minute animated film, which is one of the films I usually show when I go to the different conferences, because it's a very, very, very powerful autobiographical film. So that's sort of the evolution. So that's kind of the main focus at this point, the advocacy consulting group. Yeah, that's kind of our main signature program now. We're still do an occasional workshop and talk about daddying and what I learned from 205 interviews with the dad. So that's kind of the story.
That's great. Do you find it energizing? Because I'm sure whenever you started this journey, how people talk about fatherhood was drastically different. And now we live in a world in which people do podcasts. They've got Instagram accounts, which people are eager to share what their experience of fatherhood is like. Does that energize you to see that, because you started this whenever no one asked a dad how they were doing. That wasn't part of the conversation at all. Now there's entire groups of people where it's their entire focus. Does that energize you to realize how far we've come?
Yes. So I coined the term daddying in 1994.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
a while ago.
Right. And when I first started using that word, people said to me, Alan, you're out of your mind. No real man is ever going to say
I would
that.
never say that. Never.
So my second dating interview, which was in 1997, I interviewed a former All-State linebacker in New Mexico, Hispanic gentleman, who was a father and was currently the head of the Albuquerque Transit District night shift. And I do the interviews wherever a dad will give me an hour and a half. And
I get that. Yep.
and like you with this podcast, it had to be quiet and there had to be a place where there weren't going to be interruptions. So wherever that was going to be for them is where I did it. So I did interviews in, limousine going down to Wall Street. I
Okay.
did, interviews in a fishing boat. I did, so wherever it is. And as I like to sort of illustrate in terms of the, really large diversity of those people I interviewed. So I interviewed one man who had such an amazing art collection that the governor of his state said, if you give us your art collection when you die, we will build a museum for it. So, it's that's one end of the spectrum.
Wow. Yeah.
And I interviewed, another person actually in New Mexico who was so poor that he told me they had to use a tumbleweed for their Christmas tree.
Man. Yeah.
Yeah. So the spectrum was really very wide.
Yes.
And so the second interview was with this guy, and the interview took place in the cab of his pickup truck. And there was a gun rack on, in the back window, and there were bug cans on the floor. And I'm thinking, okay, Alan, and he's a former All-State linebacker, and
Yeah.
big. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, Alan, when you use that word daddying with this guy, I know he's going to open the door of the pickup truck and out.
Just give you a push out. Just give you a push out.
But something rather miraculous happened, which is that I discovered that the use of that word gave him permission to be in touch with the tender side of him. I'm careful with my words, so I didn't say the soft side of him because that some of us see that as a negative, but the tender side of him, which is not necessarily a negative. He just opened up in a way that probably surprised him, maybe even more than it surprised me. So we go from that, where people saying to me, Alan, nobody will ever use that word, to 10 years later, Hallmark Cards coming out with a line of cards for Father's Day using the word daddying. And people say to me, Alan, this is your chance. You can sue Hallmark for using the word. And I said, no, I want to pay Hallmark for using the word because the idea is to get the concept out there.
Yes.
It's not a matter of proprietary interest in the word. So yes, it's come a long way. My youngest daughter is in her piece, and I was the chairman of the board of her cooperative nursery school. So 50 years ago, or a little more than 50 years ago, it was unheard of. I was the first male, and people were making faces at me, and mothers were saying, this is our space, and you know,
of course,
and so forth. When I think of that, and I think of, as you just said, podcasts, advertisements where dads are not just buffoons anymore, and advertisements that tender and so forth. There are a million, and we're not talking about maternity leave only anymore. We're talking about family leave. As a at-home dad, that, that used to be absolutely, I mean, it's still not.
No, there's a lot of work to be done there.
Right. There's still a lot of work to be done. And I was remembering when my oldest daughter was born, I was living in New York City, and I took her on my back. They didn't have the snugglies where you wear your kid in the front, but she was on my back. And I went into a playground, and she was a little bit under a year old. and there were no guys in the playground. And
Mhm.
others said to me, "Are you babysitting today?"
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I said, "Are you?"
How'd that conversation go after that?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, I am a New Yorker, so there is a part of me that I call my inner New Yorker, which
Yep.
sometimes comes out at times like that.
Yes.
But that's where it was
Mhm.
50 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Now it's no longer unusual to see dads in playgrounds, going to conferences at schools, going to readings at the library, doing all these things. We're not only calling it maternity leave now. So, I wrote a piece in 2008, I think it was, called The Daddying Movement,
Mhm.
which was published by the New York Times. It was a commentary, and it really talked about how this is still under the radar, that it's happening. It flies in the face. It was called the Daddying Movement. It flies in the face of how you might imagine a movement would be run by men.
Mhm.
Probably think it would be in your face, kind of aggressive, would have a
Dominant.
right, charismatic leader,
Yeah.
and so forth. And it's none of those things.
Yeah.
It's happening one dad at a time. It's happening with people like you or a home dad. It's happening of people saying, sorry, I can't come to the meeting now. I have to be at my kid's school for the
Yeah.
conference with the teacher. And it's definitely happening. And it's kind of interesting as a result of that commentary. So I mentioned the year because it was the same year that Obama was elected. And I got a call from the Obama White House, and they
Yeah.
said, the president read your piece. Would you be willing to come in and share some of your ideas? The president wants to create a fatherhood movement. And I said, but wait a minute, what was the title of the piece? And they said, the dadding movement. I said, so I guess I believe that it already exists. So the president does not need to start it. So I think what you really want to ask is how could the president, lead the movement, but he
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
need to create it. It already exists. They had me come in anyway, even though I challenged them that way. So it was pretty interesting, especially since it's only 2 metro stops from where I live. So
That's cool.
yeah, so what was not difficult to get in there. Unfortunately, I never got to meet him directly,
Sure.
but his staff and I did talk, and it
That's
did
great.
result in some ideas.
Yeah. I think I've thought in my head before, because yeah, I go to the playground, I go to the field trips. Whenever I started being a stay-at-home dad in like 2019, I felt like I was the dad at the playground, like the dad at story time. And now I'm just a dad at story time. I'm a dad at the playground. I'm a dad at the field trip. And that means a lot to me. That's so heartwarming to me to see other dads who are eager to be like, how do I be a chaperone on this field trip? How do I make sure that I'm there for that? And that's only like 6 years that I've been lucky enough to be a stay-at-home parent. And that change feels so real. And it warms my heart. It makes me so happy to see so many dads realizing the opportunities so they can be physically present for their kids and then prioritize it at the same time.
So somebody asked me a couple of years ago, Alan, do you think your work has made an impact?
Mm-hmm.
And my direct and honest answer was, I've never really thought about it. And I don't really think about it. I've started to think about it a little bit now, and if you made a difference, if you made a contribution to the field was the way they asked the question. So I thought about it, and I think that if I could claim to make any contribution to the field, now going back to 1994, is that nobody that I had known of had written about all the research had been how important it is for children when the fathers are involved in the children's lives. But nobody at that point in anything I had read had talked about what's in it for the dads and how important it is for the dad to be
Mm-hmm.
involved in the children's lives. And we know, all the research shows, that when dads are positively involved in their children's life, all measures of well-being go up. I mean, there's no debate about that. It's just facts. You know, less incarceration, less membership in gangs, less early sexual relations, especially for girls when their dads are positively involved and so forth. I mean, there's loads and loads and loads of research. But there was nothing at that point that I knew about. What I tell people that for me, the zenith, the apex of daddying is when nurturing your child is nourishing to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's something that I think we're talking about these days. We're willing to admit that.
Mm-hmm.
And to say that I can certainly tell you that's surely so in my own case.
Yeah.
And, I mentioned to you at the beginning that I had 3 daughters and 5 grandkids. So those are my biological children. But I also
Mm-hmm.
have a very large number of what I call bonus sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know, it's sort of, I guess, the way I came out.
That's great. No, I think one of my biggest hopes of doing a podcast about fatherhood is to give dads a chance to talk about how their family energizes them. Because I think for the longest time, it was like, you work the job you hate for your family. You do this to support your family. It's like, what if you're actually building a world in which your family energizes you, in which your family propels you into like the next version of you that you're meant to be, as opposed to this constant like, well, I guess I have to do this for my kid. And it's like, why would you approach any other human being as an obligation? Like, figure out you love them, lean into that. It's okay to do this. Do this. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? It's interesting. You used the word a couple of times, energize. And so we did 2 fifth anniversary celebrations in the last few days, actually. We've never done that before because we've never been at our 5th year before either.
Yes.
But we called it also a friend-raiser, which is a nice way of saying fundraiser.
Yes.
And we did one in New York and one in DC. So we did the one in New York on Thursday and we did the one in DC on Saturday. And one of the people who was there, my youngest daughter was, because she lives in Virginia nearby where we did it in DC, came. And one of the people there was talking to her and said to her, your father has more energy, what she was politely not saying for an old guy.
Yeah.
Than I ever met. And my daughter said what he does energizes him.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons his energy level is as it is. And she's so right. She's so right. So now it's the work, but it's also, being a dad and being the daddy of the school with 515 children, that energizes you.
Yeah.
If you allow it to.
Yep. That does.
Okay.
So how I end every episode is ask like 5 questions. They're kind of like fun icebreakers. They're not rapid fire. The first question, I'll be intrigued to know if you remember this. Did you have any backup names for your daughters? Like, did you have any names that you almost named them?
Yes. Yeah. And we rejected some of the backup names when we realized what the initials were going to spell out.
Yes.
Right. So that was the main reason for abandoning the backup.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's my last name starts with an N. And I was like, oh, you can spell words with that. You could be like MAN. You can do I wanted to go that route a little bit more. I was like, please don't do this to our child. This isn't fun for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Next question would be, do you have a favorite TV or movie dad?
I have a lot of favorite ones.
Yes.
I guess the 2 that immediately come to my mind is Mrs. Doubtfire. And the extent that Robin Williams, who played Mrs. Doubtfire, would go to see his children.
Yeah.
The other all-time favorite one is To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch. And actually, we didn't talk much about the details of the Daddying Film Festival and how it works, but the award that is given to the student who wins in each of their categories of elementary, middle, high school, and undergrad college, they don't get an Oscar, they don't get a Golden Globe, they don't get an Emmy, they get an Atticus.
That's cool.
And the Atticus is actually a physical award with 2 mockingbirds,
Really?
baby and a daddy mockingbird on a pedestal. They also earn $500.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. So, yeah, those would be, I mean, I could give a list of probably 20 or 30 more, but, and it's really important to also say that it's not only dads, what we do, it's fathers and father figures.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you might think of also Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting, where he's a father figure.
Yes.
And there are a lot of movies like that. And all of our programs are that way too. You don't need to be a biological dad to, have a video submitted about you or to submit one. And by the way, we also accept films submitted by adults. We don't accept adult films, but we do.
Key distinction there.
Yeah. Perhaps somebody else has a festival like that, but
that one's not yours.
Yeah, that's not us.
That's awesome. Next question. Since you've spent so much of your life around kids, being a father, being a grandfather, do you have a go-to replacement curse word? Like, what do you say whenever you're angry and you want to say a curse word, you want to swear, but you shouldn't because of the environment? What word do you say in that moment?
It depends on the age of the children you're around. So
that's valid.
First of all, most kids, have the phallus mouth at a pretty early age right now.
Yep.
So, the words they use are the words we would want to use immediately. I don't have a particular word that I would use. I don't know. Would depend what happened at that moment.
Okay.
And who would be around me.
I'm glad you cater your language to your audience. That's probably a smart move.
Yes.
And then second to last question. Do you have a favorite kids' toy or activity? Like whenever your girls were younger or with the grandkids, what was one of your favorite things to do with them?
Mainly it would have been playing outdoors. So, and again, depended on the age. When my girls were young, we lived in Connecticut. And this time of year, the leaves started to fall. And it was before there were leaf blowers, and it was raking leaves. So it was quite an activity to assemble a giant, pile of leaves, which we would all jump in. If there was a lot of snow, it was doing snowman and, sledding, but it was mainly outdoor stuff rather than indoor stuff.
Yeah. That's fun. And then last question, if you had any advice, any words of wisdom to a dad, what words would you say to a dad? And it's a very broad question, but still, do you have anything that comes to mind whenever I ask that question?
I have a lot of things that come to mind around that, because when I do my workshops, becoming the dad you want to be. So it's really based on what I've heard from kids, plus my own experience. So when I did my 28 focus groups with the kids, which we talked about at the very beginning, one of the questions I asked the kids was, if you could create the perfect dad, what would he be like? That was what I said in my first daddying group. And the children in that daddying group were 14-year-old boys in New York City. And I got the typical eye roll.
Yeah.
Which is, hey, mister, there is no such a thing as a perfect dad. Yeah. And if there was, he'd be really boring. So part of it was the 14-year-old, confronting authority in front of his buddies. So having a little experience with kids, I sort of figured out what was going on. And I looked at him and I said, you're absolutely correct. There is no such thing as a perfect dad. And then little dig at him. I said, and there's probably also not such a perfect thing as the perfect son either. And there's no
Yes.
perfect teacher, and there's no perfect spouse, and there's no
Yeah.
perfect anything.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. So I'm going to change the question with your approval. And we're going to say, if you could create the most excellent dad you could think of, what would he be like? And so they agreed that that was okay. So here are the top 5 qualities that the kids came up with. There were 17 general ones, but the top ones were being there.
Mm-hmm.
And what this boy said in that first one, he said, I mean, really being there. And I said, what's the difference between being there and really being there? And he said, I'm going to give you an example. So my dad comes home, this is, 2000, or 1999 or 8, somewhere around that. He said, my dad comes home and he sits next to me. I'm doing my homework and he sits next to me on the couch and he turns on the television. And if you asked him, he would tell you he was there. But I would tell you he wasn't there. So being there is the very first. The second one is take us as seriously as we take ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
which sometimes people can't figure out what does that mean. So an example I would give is happened to be one that I witnessed was with a grandparent who was coming to visit. It was a divorced family, and the grandfather was visiting by himself, and the grandmother visited by herself at a different time. And the parents said to the grandfather, it's really interesting how differently the 1-year-old responds to you than he does to grandma when she comes. And I said, what do you mean? Describe, like you have a video camera, describe what happens. And she said, well, when grandma comes, and this was in a New York City apartment, when grandma comes, she rings the doorbell. I open the door. She hands me her coat to hang up. She sees the 1-year-old sitting on the floor playing with pots and pans or whatever. And she stands at the edge of the long hallway and she holds out her arms and she says, Grandma's here. And I said, what happens when Grandpa comes to visit? And she said, he rings the bell, open the door, he hangs up his coat, he sees her playing at the end of the long hallway. He goes and he sits down next to her and he starts playing with the pots and pans.
Yeah.
So one person is taking the 1-year-old seriously and one is not.
Mm-hmm.
So, that can be documented in lots of ways with older kids, of course. The third of the top 5 qualities are be a passionate advocate for us.
Yeah.
The fourth is show us you love us and be affectionate.
Yeah. Okay.
And the fifth is provide us with security and protection. And kids really do come up with those.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do my individual dadding interviews with the dads and the granddads and the great-granddads, I ask them what they think the kids said.
Mm-hmm.
And they pretty much nail it. They know. They might not use the same vocabulary exactly, but they pretty much know. The other thing I've done in the groups that I do is I ask the dads, okay, you've come to this group. It's becoming the dad you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So who is the dad you want to be? So if you want to become the dad you want to be, you better have some idea of who is the dad. What I still find is that saying it that way is immobilizing. It's just way too difficult to question, way too broad. So I've changed it. Just like not the perfect dad anymore, but the most excellent. So what I say now is, how do you want your child to describe you as a dad 5 years from now? That's still big, but it's manageable.
Yeah.
And you can get a handle on it. So if you want your kid to say, my dad was there, I guess maybe you better be there. So it's not rocket science. Yeah. So I would also say don't keep the dad you most want to be waiting.
Okay. Yeah. Like take the steps today to get there, that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't keep the dad you most want to be waiting,
Yeah.
which is easier said than done,
Very much so.
as are most of these. But you know,
Yes. That's awesome. Then other thing I have for you, Alan, is just like moment for promotion. So like if we want to find out more about the film festival, do you know like the Instagram account, website, all that stuff if you want to find out more about it?
yeah. So it's really simple. Just go to daddyingfilmfest.com. And that'll give you the information about the film festival. As I mentioned, it's going to be happening, or maybe I didn't, it's going to be happening January 30th and 31st at American University in Washington, D.C. The virtual part of it, because how it works is when the kids submit the films, we train other kids to judge their films.
That's cool.
They narrow it down to 10 semifinalists. We send the 10 semifinalists to people in the film industry, educators, therapists, and so forth, to narrow the 10 down to 5. The 5 each earn $250. We put it online for a week. The public votes.
Yeah.
The winner becomes the Atticus winner, and they earn $500. Those films that we show at the film forum and then discuss. And usually the kids show up. But as I mentioned, we also accept films by independent filmmakers, and we've had last 2 years more films submitted by adults than by kids. Some really amazing adult, films done by adults, including the last, all of the years, the winner, of the adult level has been Extraordinary.
Yeah.
And this year, I don't know how we're going to judge, who wins in that category, because there were so many amazing films that have been submitted. And our newest category this year is returning dads. So returning from incarceration and returning from deployment.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of similar things. So dad's been away and suddenly he's back in the family, and, dynamics are very different while he's been away. And so that's the newest focus. But we take films, animated films, as I mentioned, the age level of the students, music, videos, and so forth. And as I mentioned, films now from 56 countries.
That's so cool.
Pretty overwhelming. And the deadline for submitting films is the middle of December. We still have a month and a half or so to go. And all of the information of how that's done is on that website I mentioned, daddyingfilmfest.com.
Great. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you genuinely for believing that men have emotional depth to them, and trying to create spaces for them in which they can express it, because I think that is such good work to do. And I think whenever you can show people that their love matters and it cares, it changes families, it changes family histories, it changes so much. And thank you for dedicating so much of your life to that cause, is what I feel like you've basically done.
Well, and I thank you, Devin, for doing a podcast and being one of those folks who get the word out, and being a good example of, it's okay to be involved.
Yeah.
Daddy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you do end up coming to Boulder to visit your granddaughter, I will listen, I love Boulder. Boulder's gorgeous. I'll happily come up, share a meal with you, something like that. It'd be great to be able to meet you in person.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind.
All right. And let people know in your neighborhood, there's a wonderful program. We have 4 films submitted this year from a program called Documentary Youth Academy.
Okay.
And it is, I don't think it's in Boulder, but it's probably closer to you.
Yes. And
the films that have come out of there was last year's high school winner. And I'm pretty sure last year they only submitted 1. This year they submitted 4.
Okay.
So far. And it would be really hard to decide which one of them
That's awesome.
is the best. So you might want to find out. They do, I think maybe once or twice a year, they do a showing of their
Okay.
films there.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think they're based out of Colorado Springs, if I'm Googling correctly. But still, that's within like 45 minutes of where I live.
Yeah.
I think film is such a fascinating medium that starts so many conversations that you don't necessarily know how to start. So I'm all for getting people more involved with it.
Yeah. So thank you for the opportunity. Great to meet you. Daddy
Yes.
on.
Thank you so much, Allan. Daddy on yourself. You're still daddying as well. It's not just me here. So
As I said, it's a lifelong process. So
yes.
all three of my daughters are members of AARP. But I'm still daddying.
Still daddy.
Yeah. And now I have the joy of also granddaddying.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Allan, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing your story, and we'll see you next time. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Devin. Keep
All
up
right,
the
thanks,
good
Allan.
work. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at the Imperfect Dads Podcast. And make sure to give us 5 stars wherever you listen to us. Music, editing, and production is all done by me. Make sure to tune in on Mondays and most Thursdays for new episodes. This podcast is part of the Never Efface Network. Make sure to go to nevereffacenetwork.com to learn more about them.